Have you ever walked away from a completely ordinary conversation and hours later found yourself replaying it like a courtroom trial in your mind? You remember the exact tone of your voice, the pause before you answered, the look on their face. You analyze your wording, you question your jokes, you wonder if you sounded arrogant, awkward, too quiet, too loud. Long after the other person has moved on with their day, you are still there, mentally dissecting every second. Overthinking conversations after they end is not just a habit. It is a psychological pattern rooted in deeper emotional needs and fears. For many people, it feels automatic. The mind replays interactions as if it's trying to protect you from future embarrassment or rejection. But underneath that replay button is something more vulnerable, a deep desire to be accepted, understood, and safe. This tendency often begins long before adulthood. Many chronic overthinkers grew up in environments where approval felt conditional. Maybe love was warm but inconsistent. Maybe criticism came easily and praise was rare. Maybe small mistakes were magnified. In such environments, the brain learns something powerful. I must monitor myself carefully to stay safe. Conversations become high-stakes events. Words become potential landmines. As children, we are wired to scan for signs of acceptance. When that acceptance feels uncertain, the mind sharpens its vigilance. You learn to watch facial expressions closely. You memorize tone shifts. You anticipate reactions. This hyper-awareness may have once helped you adapt. It may have kept you from being scolded, rejected, or misunderstood. The brain, brilliant as it is, doesn't easily let go of survival strategies, even when the danger is long gone. In adulthood, this vigilance often transforms into post-conversation rumination. You walk away, and the internal analyst takes over. Why did I say that? Did they look annoyed? Was that joke too much? The brain tries to fill in gaps with imagined judgments. Silence from the other person becomes evidence. A delayed text reply becomes proof of disapproval. The mind would rather assume the worst than risk being caught off guard later. Psychologically, this pattern is closely tied to social anxiety and rejection sensitivity. Rejection sensitivity is the tendency to anxiously expect, readily perceive, and intensely react to rejection. Even neutral events can feel loaded. If someone says okay instead of great, it might trigger a spiral of doubt. The emotional brain interprets ambiguity as threat, and the thinking brain rushes in to analyze every detail for answers. There's also perfectionism woven into this pattern. Not necessarily perfectionism about work or achievement, but social perfectionism. The belief that you must say the right thing, be the right amount of funny, serious, intelligent, agreeable. Conversations become performances. And once the performance ends, you evaluate it harshly. Rarely do overthinkers replay moments of success with the same intensity as they replay perceived mistakes. What makes this exhausting is that the mind frames rumination as problem solving. It feels productive. It feels responsible. It feels like you're preparing for the next time. But rumination is circular. It doesn't lead to clarity. It leads to self-criticism. You don't arrive at resolution. You arrive at self-doubt. In daily life, this can quietly erode confidence. You might hesitate to speak up in meetings because you dread the post-conversation autopsy. You might avoid social events because the mental replay afterward feels heavier than the event itself. You may even start shrinking your personality, speaking less, sharing less, just to reduce potential mistakes to analyze later. Relationships are deeply affected by this pattern. Overthinkers often crave connection, but simultaneously fear it. After a date, you might replay every detail and convince yourself you seemed boring. After a disagreement with a partner, you might obsess over one sentence you regret, even if the issue was resolved. Instead of resting in reassurance, your mind searches for hidden meanings. This creates a painful paradox. The more you care about people, the more you analyze your interactions with them. The more you value connection, the more pressure you put on yourself to perform it perfectly. Love becomes something to manage rather than experience. There is also a neurological component at play. The brain's threat detection system, the amygdala, activates quickly when social risk is perceived. For someone prone to overthinking, social evaluation feels like a real threat. Even though no physical danger exists, the body can still respond with stress. Elevated cortisol, racing thoughts, shallow breathing. When the body is in that state, the mind searches for reasons. It combs through the conversation looking for what went wrong. But here's the truth that often gets buried beneath the noise. Most people are not analyzing you nearly as much as you analyze yourself. They are too busy replaying their own lines, too busy worrying about how they came across. In many cases, both parties walk away from the same conversation privately doubting themselves. So, why does the mind cling to this habit? Because certainty feels safer than ambiguity. The brain prefers a painful explanation over no explanation at all. If someone hasn't responded yet, your mind would rather conclude, "I said something stupid," than sit in the unknown. Rumination creates a false sense of control. If you can just think about it long enough, maybe you can prevent future rejection. But over time, this pattern damages your relationship with yourself. Your inner voice becomes a critic rather than a companion. Instead of learning from interactions with curiosity, you dissect them with judgment. You become both the defendant and the prosecutor in your own mental courtroom. The cost is subtle but significant. Chronic overthinking increases anxiety. It disrupts sleep. It keeps you mentally anchored to the past instead of present in the now. It steals emotional energy that could be spent building genuine confidence. Yet, it's important to approach this pattern with compassion. Your mind is not trying to sabotage you. It is trying to protect you. Somewhere along the way, you learned that social mistakes were dangerous. Your nervous system adapted accordingly. This pattern is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that you are sensitive to connection. Sensitivity itself is not the problem. In fact, it often makes you empathetic, thoughtful, and attuned to others. You likely notice subtleties others miss. You care about how your words affect people. You want to communicate clearly and kindly. These are strengths. The challenge arises when self-awareness turns into self-surveillance. Healing begins with shifting from judgment to curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" you can gently ask, "What am I afraid would happen if I didn't analyze this?" Often the answer reveals a deeper fear. I'll be rejected. They'll think I'm stupid. I'll lose connection. Naming the fear reduces its power. Another step is recognizing cognitive distortions. Overthinkers often engage in mind reading, assuming they know what others are thinking without evidence. They catastrophize small details. They focus on perceived negatives while ignoring positives. When you catch these patterns, you don't need to argue with them aggressively. Simply noticing them interrupts the spiral. Practicing self-compassion is crucial. Imagine a close friend told you they were replaying a conversation and felt embarrassed. You likely wouldn't say, "Yes, you were terrible." You would reassure them. Offer yourself the same kindness. Replace "I'm so awkward" with "I'm human." Conversations aren't scripts. Grounding techniques also help. When the replay begins, bring your attention to the present moment. Notice your breathing. Notice your surroundings. Remind yourself that the conversation is over and you are safe. The brain can only ruminate when it believes there is unfinished business. Gently signal that there isn't. Over time, exposure helps too. The more you allow yourself to speak imperfectly and survive it, the more your nervous system learns that imperfection does not equal rejection. Confidence is not built by perfect performance. It is built by surviving small social risks and realizing the world doesn't collapse. Most importantly, recognize that authenticity connects more deeply than precision. People rarely remember your exact phrasing. They remember how they felt around you. Warmth, sincerity, presence. These matter far more than perfectly structured sentences. If you see yourself in this pattern, know that you are not alone. Many thoughtful, intelligent people quietly struggle with post-conversation rumination. It doesn't mean you lack social skill. It often means you care deeply. Change is possible, but it doesn't begin with forcing your mind to be silent. It begins with understanding why it speaks so loudly. Your overthinking developed for a reason. Thank it for trying to protect you. Then slowly teach it that connection doesn't require perfection. Conversations are not exams. They are exchanges between two imperfect humans. You are allowed to stumble. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to be misunderstood sometimes. None of these moments define your worth. The next time you catch yourself replaying an interaction, pause and ask gently, What would it feel like to let this go? Even if you can only release 10% of the worry, that is progress. Over time, those small releases create space for ease, space for confidence, space for self-trust. You don't have to earn connection by flawless performance. You are already worthy of it. And the more you treat yourself with the same patience you offer others, the quieter that internal courtroom becomes. Healing doesn't mean you'll never overthink again. It means when you do, you respond with compassion instead of criticism. And in that shift, from harsh analysis to gentle awareness, you begin to free yourself.